And I did in the chat some outline in case you want. And then we do have 2 different start scenarios that drone footage from YouTube, and one kind of focuses on a boat end view, and the other is a pin end of the line view. So we thought those were kind of good scenarios to talk about strategies for the key points of a race, like the mark groundings and the starts, and then just kind of have an open discussion about questions that come up as you guys are watching it. But otherwise, I jotted down some specific notes on things that we could talk about as we kind of watch through some of these videos. So Ryan, do you want me to share my screen and pull up the videos? I've got them up on YouTube here.
Yep, you can do that. I just want to add one thing. So the sailing rules that we sail under are the U.S. sailing rules at Lake Harriet, and we also have the Lake Harriet sailing instructions that are like a add-on to those rules. But the main rules are like the U.S. sailing rules, and so to actually like get a rule book, U.S. sailing rule book, you have to pay, I forgot how much it is, maybe like $30, but it actually happens to be really similar to the world sailing rules, which are actually free online, published by sailing.org. And so they're almost exactly the same. If you're ever in a rules situation or like protest, you might want to actually have a rule book. But if you don't want to pay the $30, the world sailing rules are a really good resource. And these rules change every 4 years. And every year that is the last year of the rules happens to be the Olympics. So they like have 4 years of sailing under these rules. And then to like test the rules, make sure they're good. And then the Olympics happens. And so we'll see if, since the Olympics not happening, we'll see if they extend these rules one more year. So here, I'll post in the chat the world sailing rules. Okay, all right, Natalie, you can get started.
Okay, and sorry, I posted that outline in the chat. It's not the most beautiful document. It looks better in Word, so maybe I can email it out after. It's really just bullet points and key things that we'll talk more in depth about. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start with the 2019 Cedar Spring Regatta. I'll fast forward to the part where the Sea Scouts are kind of heading upwind and getting ready to round the mark. And then I think we'll just kind of watch through it for maybe a minute as boats are rounding, and then pause and talk about the different things that you notice. So you'll see the situations like some boats coming in on port at the windward mark ley line, and just kind of keep an eye on some of those things, and we'll talk about some of those rules and what some boats chose to do and what worked out for them and what did not. So let me pull that up here. Share screen. Okay, sorry, it's my first time running a Zoom meeting. So, okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna just click play on this one, and I'll be quiet as we watch a little bit, and then maybe we'll go back and focus on certain areas. Just let's take a look first.
Yeah, you might want to maximize on the right-hand side.
Like that?
Yep.
Okay. So I fast forwarded. This is kind of the second half of the upwind leg here. So they're getting close to the windward mark. Here we go. And the offset. Okay, so kind of pause here. There was a couple of key things that I noticed in this video related to the rules. And so I'll kind of go back for a quick second and pause where those key parts are and talk about some of the rules here. So I'll stop right here. As you can see, they're approaching that windward mark there. And 007 is to windward of LD below there. They're both on port tack, and going into it you can kind of see, oh, is 007 going to have room to tack and complete their tack inside of LD there. So you can kind of see how this plays out. Obviously this is a close one here. And clearly there's room there for them to tack. That was the smart move there. And then I want to focus specifically on, if you can keep an eye on A22 coming in here, right there, these guys coming in, tacking onto port, and they've got boats coming on starboard ley line. So here, the main rules that we're focusing on, obviously, are port and starboard, and then tacking in the zone, which is rule 18.3. And I don't know how many of you have rule books handy, but I do have mine out. Figure we can talk about some of the rules specifically, but it looks like A22 is trying to sneak in there, and as you can tell, they have not completed their tack. And the boat that's to windward of them, A136, you see them head up to avoid them during their tack. So tacking in the zone, which is rule 18.3, I'll read it out loud for you guys quick, but it says, if a boat in the zone of a mark, and as a reminder, the zone is a 3 boat length zone, to be left to port, passes head to wind from port to starboard tack and is fetching the mark, she shall not cause a boat that has been on starboard tack, so 136 had been on starboard tack, since entering the zone, to sail above a close hauled course to avoid contact and give mark room to that boat that becomes overlapped inside her. So essentially, A22 there is tacking in the zone. A136 has to sail above a close hauled course to avoid them. So A22 is then breaking rule 18.3 of tacking in the zone, which is kind of one of the downfalls of coming in on port ley line there and trying to squeeze in, especially in a larger fleet. This fleet doesn't look too big, but when you get into fleets with 30 plus boats out there, sometimes it's going to be harder to squeeze in on that ley line. So that's one of those tactical things you're going to want to think about when you're coming in to round the mark or setting up for when you want to go out to that ley line. So you'll see A22 bails out there and is going to start doing a penalty. Well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
720.
One thing I like to talk about or think about when I'm coming into that windward mark, especially when there's a lot of boats around, is I try to think about how I can come and if I'm coming in from the left side, the port side, on port tack, I try to think about, okay, how do I avoid tacking in that 3 boat length zone at all costs? I think, Natalie, can you mute?
Yeah.
Otherwise I get an echo. Okay. And so, yeah, if you can think about how you can not have that 3 boat length goal, plan ahead when there's a lot of other boats around you, and then make a clean tack onto starboard where you're able to get around the mark. I think that'll help you a lot in getting yourself not into messy situations when you're trying to get around that windward mark. And also think about if you're questioning like where you need to be, try to give yourself like a little extra space, maybe go a little bit past the ley line in case the wind shifts, and so you make sure you can get around that windward mark. So Natalie, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah. So that's just a windward mark rounding situation where some stuff actually was going on in some rural situations. Obviously, other things you want to think about at the windward mark, if two boats are on the starboard tack on the ley line, it's about making sure you give each other room. And specifically, like what Ryan was saying, you know, maybe give yourself a little bit extra, a little bit more than you think you might need. Because if you're sailing and the boat to windward of you is not able to move a little bit in either direction without immediately hitting you, you're not giving them room to avoid. So that's another key point. I really like these starts videos. So I'm going to play through some of this and kind of talk while we watch. This is the race 3 start, which focuses on a boat end of the start. Let's see.
Natalie, you can, if you want to, you can slow down the speed of the video using the low gear thing. I don't know if that'll help or not.
Okay.
Hit the gear on the right hand side, just hit.
Okay. Okay, so as you can see, the boats are lining up. They're getting ready to start here. And so some key things with setting up for start is obviously choosing which end of the line you want to be on. Since we're focusing here on the boat end, we'll talk about boat end stuff. And power-ups, which you'll watch some of these boats do. So start with that tactically wise. You want to make sure you're getting off the line with speed and a lane when you're going. So you can see some of these boats heel up, push down a little bit and trim in as then they head up to get going. If I go back a little bit, you'll see some of the boats that were more crunched up here right at the committee boat, which sometimes is a hot spot to start. I think it's important to keep in mind that even if you really want to start at the boat end and know you want to go to the right side of the course, sometimes if you can dip down and stay on the right side of the line, like avoid that big pileup at the boat, you might be better off. So as this drone goes, you can't really see everything, but I'm guessing that these boats that tried to win the actual boat end of the line may not have gotten off the line with as much speed because they were so cramped and weren't able to get going and get their boat moving as fast as some of the others, because they have to sit there and luff and wait while the boats below them down here are already going. These guys are still luffing. And some of the same rules apply here. Obviously, windward and leeward boats, giving each other room, time, and opportunity to avoid each other. If you end up like boat 2007 here, who is kind of stuck back there going slow with bad air, that's a scenario where potentially you might want to think about tacking out to get a clear lane, get some clear air, and head back to the side of the course if they really wanted to go out that way. Brian, do you want to add anything about kind of boat end start tactics and things?
I think I'd like to add, so we have like a wide range of skill levels in our audience. Oh, can you mute while I'm talking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so what I like to the way I like to remember the rules, if you're trying to remember a windward leeward out there, like, do you have the right of way? Are you the windward boat or are you the leeward boat? I think an easy way to remember that is Okay, Natalie, if you can go back to that that screen share. Okay, easy way to remember that, like, is 2692 windward or leeward, is 2645 windward or leeward. So easy way to remember that is, like, so 2692's sail is between him and the other boat. So 2692 is the windward boat. So if you're, so easy way to remember windward leeward is if your sail is between you and the other boat. And 2645 knows he's lured, or he's lured because the sail is not between him and 2692. But then 2645 has to remember that there's another boat, we can't see their sail number, that's to leeward of him. So 2645 finds themselves where they have right away on one of the boats, but not the other boat. So one thing 2645 has to remember is they have to leave enough space between their boat and the boat to leeward of them that we can see right there. If that boat wants to start heading up and sail close to the wind, 2645 has to leave space where that boat can start to head up. And so that's what keeping clear means. They have to leave a little space there. And then also, if that leeward boat starts to head up, then they have to react and start heading up themselves. So that's something you got to think about on the starting line is, okay, is this, while you're trying to going fast right there, you have to think about, okay, how do I leave space between me and the leeward boat? And it's also a lot faster that windward boat and not like super close to the leeward boat, because that leeward boat's going to be giving you bad air anyways. So it's a lot faster to follow the rules here and give yourself a little space between you and that leeward boat. And so one thing you got to think about in terms of boat handling is to head up, you need to have some power in your sails and be moving forward to head up properly. So you got to kind of anticipate if this leeward boat is going to be right next to you. So maybe you may have to look kind of like through your sail a little bit, maybe under the boom here, to see if there's a leeward boat right next to you on the start line. And then also a lot of times the leeward boat on the start line will come from behind you. So you may have to look behind you to see if the leeward boat is coming. So that's one thing you don't think about, that they might be coming behind you. And then if you have a boat to windward of you, so there's your sail isn't between you and the other boat. So you have a boat that's to windward of you. So 2699 is to windward of 2692. See, there's plenty of space there. So they don't have to worry. 2699 doesn't have to worry about the rules, or worry about following 2692. And so this is one point on the start line, is a lot of times you try to not have someone to leeward of you. So that's exactly what 2699 is doing. So now when you try to accelerate your boat, 2699 can turn away from the wind a little bit here to try to pick up speed, which is the like ideal start. If you can sail like a little bit away from the wind to try to pick up speed, but that's something like 2692. He's not going to be able to sail a little bit away from the wind because he has a leeward boat right by him. So that's one thing you want to think about, like 2692 here, if they could have set themselves up where they're maybe like a little closer to the right side of the starting line. Maybe if they could have set themselves up a little closer to 2699, then they'd have a little bit more space to head down and pick up speed here. So, and then that's a thing I see, like a beginner mistake I see it a lot of times is they won't be able to hold their boat in one spot on the starting line. So like 2692, I didn't see it there, but maybe a lot of the times someone will get themselves into 2692's position if they just keep sailing down the starting line and all of a sudden they find themselves really close to the other boats. One thing you can do to prevent that and not sail yourself into a pack of boats is to let out your sail, point your sail, or point, and then more importantly, point your boat into the wind. So you have to know the wind direction, which is helpful if you have like size say telltales. And then also what helps you to ease your sail is to not have any vang on, which is one thing that some people don't think about on the starting line. Is your vang pulls in your sail pretty similar to how your main sheet pulls in. All right. Natalie, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that sounds good. Thanks for the reminder that we have all different skill levels of racers. So just, I guess one of my tips to newer sailors or newer racers is to get your hands on a copy of the rule book. When I first started out in high school, I read it multiple times. I didn't really know what I was even reading, but the more you familiarize yourself with the terms and the language, the more you can kind of identify these situations on the water and help apply the rules. So that's kind of one of my tips with if you're really new to racing, to just read through this a couple times through the rule book, especially the definitions at the beginning, as well as the section on when boats meet. Those are the main rules that will come into play while you're out there sailing. But yeah, those are all great points on the start. Windward and leeward, trying to get a hole, like so that you have room to maneuver, to power up and get speed. So I'm going to play the pin end start of the race. And then at the end, we'll look at a leeward mark rounding and talk about some of that. So the pin end start would be that left side of the starting line. And it's always an interesting place to start. Tactically, if you know you want to go out to that left side of the course, or maybe the breeze has shifted a bunch and you're going to try to start on that end and tack with the fleet over. Those are all things that before the race you should be thinking about, looking at the breeze, checking your angles, sailing around a bit when you first get out there to help decide where on the line you do want to start. You'll see a couple mistakes here as we watch this. Some boats set up too soon or too low or too high. Some don't even make the line, have to loop around. So all these things happen to everybody out there at some point. So we'll kind of watch some of this and talk about maybe ways to help avoid that and some strategies if you wanted to start over on this side of the line. So You can see everybody's kind of luffing. A couple boats pretty close together here. See how that boat's heading down and trying to get some space. You always want to try to keep a little bit of space between you and other boats. You have room to do some of that maneuvering. So these boats down here did not make the line. They did not make it. These guys are off. And then as you can see, some people who set up too late, or maybe they're newer and trying to give each other more space, are some in the second row back here, even third row. It looks like,
you say what you mean I did not make the line?
oh, sure. Yep. So let me go back here. Thanks for your question. So if I stop here, so this boat right here is the pin end of the line. So you have to start between this boat down there, the committee boat, and then the pin end of the line boat. So these boats down here, as I play, you'll notice that they don't start between the two boats here. Something went wrong on their setup. Maybe the breeze shifted, and they aren't able to head up and sail a close haul course to get through the starting line there. And so what they end up doing is they're over there. They're probably going to have to jibe around and restart. So that's kind of what I mean by they didn't the start line there.
Okay, thank you.
So how,
Can happen.
Natalie,
Yeah.
how do they avoid that situation so they make sure they make it?
Yeah, so my tips for that are getting your boat handling in order, practicing a lot of stopping your boat, starting your boat, stopping your boat, and starting your boat when you're practicing, so that you have good control of knowing how long it takes you to power up and get your boat moving. Once you kind of have a good feel for the boat, obviously other factors come into play, like how windy it is going to depend on how long it takes you to get your boat moving. So it looks like the breeze during this race is pretty light. So usually you're not going to want to set up too far away from the line, because you're going to have a harder time up there. So that's kind of the main thing, is not setting up too low down here, and knowing where is upwind, where is close hauled, so you can, before the start, be sailing around and check, where is my upwind angle, how high can I actually point and be sailing upwind without luffing my sail and slowing down. And then that'll kind of give you an idea of where you're able to set up on the line. So I'll go back.
Yeah, I want to add that starting by the port end of the line that's probably the most difficult spot on the line to start. So that's something to think about. And then if you start right at the starboard end of the line too, there can be a lot of boats there. And so I would recommend, if you're a beginner, to try to find a spot on the line where there's not a lot of boats. And then it'll be easier to start, easier to get clean air, so you'll go faster. Other boats won't be disturbing your wind. So, and then even myself, I always try to start not by the other boats, because it's just, you're going to get yourself in less rules violations, and then you're going to have more clean air.
Excuse me, Ryan. On that line, it seems pretty intuitive to say that, but as a practical matter, it seems like maybe it would be more difficult. Does that make sense?
Sorry, but can you repeat that? Do you have a question? Sorry, the audio was bad.
Yeah, let me try that again. What you're saying makes perfect sense in terms of trying to find some space to start. Um, in the very few races that I've done, it didn't seem like there was that kind of a spot available. So I wonder if you could just speak to that.
Yeah. So depending on the start line, sometimes the race committee will make a very long start line, and then there will be a lot of space. And sometimes, like, the race committee will not make a long starting line, and then there won't be a lot of space. So yeah, so one thing, so it's easier to do if the race committee makes a long starting line. It's easier to like find a hole. If it's like a shorter starting line, then that can be more difficult to find space. But that's the goal, is to always try to find space where you can. If it is a shorter starting line, one thing you can do to get a spot is to go on starboard and stop your boat, maybe like 1 minute before the start, and let out your sail, let off your vang, then point your boat into the wind. And then you can try to hold your spot on the line for 1 minute. And if your sail is let all the way out, then that's going to help you kind of create space on the line. And if you're a beginner, that's more difficult to hold your boat on the spot for 1 minute on the starting line. But that's a skill that like all beginners should work towards practicing, is just to hold your boat into the wind. And if you can do that for a minute, then that's a good goal. And so that's something you can do. You don't have to practice that in a race. You can just go to a buoy. So there's like 4 buoys on Lake Harriet, and like permanent buoys on each corner of the lake. And then you can go sail over to one of those buoys, and like when it's not a race, and just try to hold your boat into the wind at that buoy for a minute. And so the key is to holding your boat in one spot, which is pretty difficult, more difficult than it sounds. The keys to doing that are, you have to know the wind direction. That's like number one. So it helps to have the telltales on your side stays, which I use, like those old audio cassette tapes, like the plastic tape in them as telltales. Some people use yarn on the side stays. And so you have to know the wind direction and then use those telltales to know where to point your boat into the wind. And then also let out your sail a little bit, and to hold your boat into the wind, and then also have the vang off. So those are the 3 things. And you can practice holding your boat into the wind. And you also always want to make sure you're moving slightly forward, because as soon as you stop your boat, you're going to lose control of your boat. So when I say stop your boat and learn how to hold it in one place, it's really, you're trying to stop your boat, hold it in one place, and always slowly keep your boat, like as slow as possible, moving forward. Otherwise, as soon as you stop, then you're going to lose control of your boat.
Great, thank you very much.
And then one thing, if you do lose control, so like you start going backwards, One thing I'd recommend to get yourself out of irons when you're going backwards is just to pull your boom towards you. Like instead of just pulling in your sail with the main sheet, actually like grab the boom, and then you can pull it like past. You can like over trim your sail if you grab the boom just for like a couple seconds. That'll help turn your boat away from the wind, and that's a really good way to get out of irons. If you lose control and you start going backwards, that's a really good way to do it. Some people just try to pull in their sail with the main sheet, and then that doesn't get them out of irons. It's like you have to like overdo it, where you pull your boom across the center of the boat towards you to move your boat away from the wind.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other questions on like starting techniques, tactics? It's kind of hard without a whiteboard, admittedly. That's usually my best method of demonstrating and showing scenarios. Otherwise, we'll move on to the leeward mark rounding and talking most specifically about mark room and what that means, and overlap and what that means. Okay, so this is again the Sea Scows. Let's see. 11 minutes. Okay. So these boats are going downwind here. When we talk downwind sailing, the wind is coming from behind you. And the big rules for downwind sailing are really a lot of the same for upwind, port and starboard, and windward and leeward. So as Ryan was saying, if your sail is between you and another boat, A14 here is windward to 007 here. 007 is the leeward boat. So 007 currently has the right of way. If they were to head up this way, then A14 would have to avoid them and give them room to maneuver there. But what you'll see here, and these boats are on port tack, so what you'll see here is that A14 is going to jibe onto starboard tack. And once they're on starboard tack, they now have the right of way. And so 007 will jibe over as well. And then as we approach the mark, we'll talk about room and overlap and things. So A14 jibes. They're on starboard, so now 007 is going to jibe. And A14 here, if we're talking about overlap specifically, overlap is, it's defined as, and I'll just kind of read it for you guys. One boat is clear astern of another boat, so they're not overlapped if their hull and equipment in normal position are behind a line of beam from the aftermost point of the other hull's equipment in normal position. So their equipment is in a normal position. Nothing is weird going on with their boats. So if any part of their hull is overlapped with the other. So as you can obviously see, this boat is overlapped with that boat. A14 has overlap on 007. The angle's a little weird here, so I'm not exactly sure overlap here, but it looks like 007 might be overlapped as well on LD9. Obviously, a clear astern example would be M41 is clear astern of this boat here. I can't see their sail. Obviously, clear astern of these boats up here. No part of this boat, of this hull, is overlapped with any parts of these boats up here. So if you are overlapped with a boat, you're as you're going into the zone, which is 3 boat lengths, you're entitled to mark room. If you are not overlapped as you enter the zone, you are not entitled to room. You have to keep clear of that other boat. So at this moment, these boats are definitely overlapped as they approach the mark. So 007 has to give A14 room to round, and LD9 has to give 007 and A14 room to round. So I know I'm going kind of fast through here, but that's the main rule as you're going around the leeward mark, is being overlapped when you hit the zone. So that applies, and it's a mental zone necessarily when you think about it. 3 boat lengths, 3 hull lengths. Obviously an MC is a little bit smaller than the C boat here. But what I like to do when I'm approaching the zone, if I'm near other boats, is to be talking to these boats around me saying, hey, I have room, or hey, I need room, I'm overlapped, I need room to round. If I A14 coming in, I'm telling that to 007, hey, I need room, and 007's probably telling LD9, hey, I'm overlapped, I need room for 2, because they have to give both of these boats room to go around that mark. So you'll see they going around the mark there, and other boats will start to come in. And if you can kind of watch and see, clear astern, these boats are not overlapped, so no rules really coming in play on that. So if you've sailed in a busier fleet, you've probably experienced the overlap, room to round the mark scenarios. If it's a little bit more spread out, maybe you haven't run into it yet. But it's definitely a big rule to know when you're getting a sing. So I'll pause it here. And Ryan, I'll see if you want to add anything about the rules. Otherwise, we can talk tactically about rounding a mark and the fastest way to get your boat to round the mark. And maybe, I think there's probably not a gate here. It looks like there's only 1 mark, but if there were a gate, what would be some things to think about as we are choosing a gate?
Yeah. Do you want to go back to the downwind before they round the mark? I'll talk about the downwind. Oh. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so one thing to think about when you're going downwind is, so the first thing that applies downwind is port starboard. You have to figure out, are you on starboard? So how do you know which boats are on starboard right now? It's the boats that are on starboard have their sail on the left side of their boat. So everyone right here is actually on port, but if someone jibed and put their sail on the left side of their boat, then they would be on starboard. And then, so you're either on port or starboard. And then windward leeward applies if you're on the same tack or jibe. So everyone is on the same jibe here, so windward leeward's going to apply. But one thing to think about is, so you have to know pretty much at all times, are you on port or starboard? So the only question you have to ask yourself is the sail on the left side of your boat? And then if yes, then you are on starboard. And then one thing a lot of, I see beginners make a mistake here, and then they'll end up following another boat, which when I was a beginner, this happened to me, and I would follow other boats, is when you're going downwind, a lot of times you're only looking at the other downwind boats, but you still have to follow the rules with the boats that go around the mark and start heading upwind. So you have to know, so if there's a downwind boat and then an upwind boat coming at you, you have to kind of look under your boom to try to see if there's an upwind boat that looks like it might hit you. And then you have to know if there's an upwind and a downwind boat, you have to ask yourself first, okay, is your sail on the left side of your boat? And then you're on starboard. And then you have to ask yourself, is the other boat's sail on the left side? If they're on starboard and they're the upwind boat, you're the downwind boat. If you're both on starboard, then it's windward leeward. And then the downwind boat has to keep clear because they're the windward boat. They're closer to the wind. But the one time the downwind boat will have the right of way over an upwind boat is if the downwind boat has the sail on the left side of their boat, so they're on starboard, and the upwind boat has their sail on the right side of the boat, they're on port. So in that scenario, the downwind boat would have right of way over the upwind boat. So that's, but all other scenarios, when a boat is sailing upwind, they're going to have right of way over the boat going downwind. It's only that one exception case that you have to remember of when the downwind boat's on starboard sailing downwind and the upwind boat's on port sailing upwind, then they are going to have right of way. So one thing, so generally you gotta kind of look out a lot when you're sailing downwind and look out for those upwind boats. And that's probably like, yeah, so that's just one thing you have to think about. And then one, yeah, I'll stop there. Let Natalie start talking.
Okay, so along the lines of what you were just talking about, you do see this boat here is going to be tacking onto starboard. They're going upwind and they're going to come across a downwind boat here. So they're on starboard, the sail's on the left side of the boat. They're approaching A77. The sail is also on their left side of the boat, so they're on starboard. So both of these boats are on starboard. And so I'll ask you guys, if they're both on starboard, then what rule would apply as these boats approach each other?
Would be a windward leeward.
Yeah, exactly. And so they don't get into a situation that's too close, but absolutely. So if you're already on the same tack, then it's who's windward, who's leeward. And it's important to always be looking out at the boats around you, and always be thinking about what tack am I on, what tack are they on, just to keep it fresh in your mind and start thinking about the scenario before you get this close to somebody else. It's like right after you tack or before you tack, you're looking around to see, are there other boats that I might come across that might get in the way? There are other rules that I need to be thinking about before I make these moves. So.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
let me just,
and then, yeah, Ryan.
I just want to add that, yeah, just like sailing a car, you have a blind spot on your sailboat, and your blind spot is your sail. So whether you're sailing upwind or downwind, a lot of times you have to look under your boom to try to find, like, are you on a collision course with another boat? So I'm always constantly like looking under my boom during a sailboat race to try to figure out if there's boats that I might hit. So I'm always checking that blind spot.
And then with our last 5 minutes here, I think we'll look at some of these mark roundings for wide and tight. I'm sure you've heard the term. As you've started to sail, a good mark rounding, you should come in wide. And as you the mark, you should be right next to it. You want to leave as little space between you and that mark as possible to avoid other boats sneaking in there that were behind you, and to just be the most furthest upwind boat there. So that boat there had a nice rounding, you can tell, compared to this boat who rounded, and look how much lower they are because of their rounding. So it makes a big difference to have a nice wide and tight rounding. Some of that is just setting yourself up with room and space to round, and not getting caught in what we call a pinwheel of boats. So if you're coming in with a bunch of boats, like these first ones are up here, when they first come around, this is like a mini pinwheel. There are 3 of them. A14 is in a good spot because they're on the inside, but LD9 is on the outside here, and they have to give these boats room, and they don't end up way outside for their rounding. They're going to want to try to slow down a little bit so that they can round right on this person's stern and not below them, but right behind them. So they did an okay job of that. Left a little bit more space than you probably should. See how that boat kind of snuck in there and some of that. So that's some of the tactical thinking and boat handling thinking for a leeward mark rounding. Ryan, do you want to add anything about rounding the leeward mark specifically?
Yeah, so one thing, if you hit the mark, then you fouled, and you need to do a penalty turn then. So the way you do that, if you hit any of the buoys, and you have to do a 360. So then you have to tack and jibe, and before you do your 360, you have to make sure you get out of the way of all the other boats, because when you're doing your penalty turn, you don't have the right of way. So, and another thing to think about when you're doing your penalty turn, you have to do it right away. You can't like sail half the race and then do your penalty turn. You have to, as soon as you foul and hit a buoy, you have to get out of the way of the other boats and then do your 360, which is a tack and a jibe. And one thing, like strategically, when I'm doing my 360, I like to think about if I'm kind of going in the downwind direction first, I will jibe first and then tack, and I'm going more in the upwind direction, I'll tack first, then jibe. And then I find I can do my penalty turn faster if I only have one board down instead of both boards down. And I try to have that leeward board down when I'm doing my spin. And if you hit another boat and you follow them, then that's a 720. So that's a tack jibe. And and then if you're in a big rules scenario where like a bunch of boats follow each other when you're going around a mark, one thing to remember is only one boat has to do a penalty turn for each situation. So what that means is if you're like in a chain of 3 boats, like Natalie, if you go to those 3 boats surrounding in that video, let's say that when these boats go in round, if the outer boat doesn't give the inside boats round, and then all 3 boats hit each other while they're going around the mark, then only one boat has to spin in that situation, and it's going to be the outermost boat, because the middle boat is supposed to give room to the inside boat, but the middle boat can't do it if they don't have enough room from the outermost boat. So that's one thing to think about if there's multiple boats that foul in one situation, only one boat has to do a penalty turn.
So I think maybe we'll open it up to some questions. I know we could dive a lot deeper on some of the specifics of the rules with overlap and port starboard scenarios, but with the video we have, those are some of the highlights that we wanted to share. Are there any pressing questions or thoughts that people have?
I would like to check my understanding of something. So it's, as I understand it, unlike the rest of sailing, overtaking is not relevant except for the overlap part. Like, you don't get way, you're not the privileged vessel because you're being overtaken. It's all starboard port and windward leeward, correct?
There is still overtaking and overtaken, because overlap has to be established, and that can sometimes be a gray area of when it is established. So the boat that is clear astern that's overtaking needs to give that boat their overtaking time and opportunity to avoid them if necessary, if that makes sense. So it's still part of the racing rules of sailing, with the clear astern, clear ahead piece.
So one thing I'd like to add is, so overtaking only applies if you're both on starboard or both on port. Otherwise, it's port starboard. But if you are on the same same starboard, or you're both on port, then overtaking will apply.
Okay, so given that windward leeward also applies there, again, in the coal regs, the priority is the overtaking, that overrides everything else. But in racing, is it starboard port, windward leeward, then overtaking?
So hard because I can't draw here. So it's going to be starboard port, and then it's going to be windward leeward will apply. But if you're like sailing downwind and another boat, so you're on starboard and then another downwind boat is on starboard, then if you're both on the same jibe, then you can't hit someone from behind. If you hit someone from behind and hit their back of the boat, then you were the overtaking in the boat and you fouled them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's the main case where they would not all coincide with each other. So in that case, it doesn't matter the windward leeward if you're overtaking on the same tack. You don't have right of way. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So then I think maybe it's rule 15 in the book that kind of addresses that, is when a boat acquires right away. So if they're both on starboard and that boat becomes the leeward boat, they have to initially give that other boat room to keep clear. So you can't, like Ryan said, if you're just powering in faster than somebody and all of a sudden you become leeward boat and you immediately head up right into that person and say leeward, you have to think, well, did I give that person the time and opportunity to avoid me first? Are there any other questions or clarifications?
Hey, I have a question for you guys. Like after you've passed the leeward mark, if you're kind of in the middle of the fleet, it's a little bit uncomfortable because you got bad air from all the boats who have rounded the mark ahead of you, and then there's all these other boats coming down, kind of seemingly limiting your options a little bit. So, I mean, how do you think about what to do just just in the moments after you rounded the mark tactically?
Yeah, I can.
That's
Oh,
to
answer?
Ian. Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, if I just rounded and there's a bunch of downwind boats still coming, yeah, I try to think about kind of the first thing I think about after I round the mark, or even before I round the mark, is going back upwind, kind of which tack is the favored tack. So which tack is going to take me closer to the buoy. So I think about that. And then I think about getting clean air. So clean air is going to evolve, like both downwind boats can give you bad air and boats going upwind can give you bad air. So you have to try to think about, okay, how do I sail my boat so I don't sail underneath the downwind boats, and then you don't sail underneath the boats going upwind. So try to think about, okay, how do I sail my boat where I get clean air? And then also there's all the downwind boats also are making a bunch of waves too, which can slow you down. So I generally try to kind of decide right away, like, okay, after I round this mark, am I gonna try to tack and go to the left side of the course right away? Or am I gonna try to keep going, go to the right side of the course? Because if there's a lot of boats coming, you kind of have to make that decision usually pretty early. So it's a lot of times if you want to tack right after you round the leeward mark, a lot of times you want to do that right away. But it depends where the other boats are on the course. So you don't sail underneath all their sails and sail through their bad air. But usually I try to start going to the side I want to go to right away. I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Thanks.
Does that answer it?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Natalie, do you want to add?
I think the only thing I would add is sometimes when I get behind or in the middle or in the back and I'm like, okay, I need clear air. Sometimes I make the mistake of really slamming one side of the course. I'm like, I'm going all the way out this way so that I'm in super clear air. And usually you don't want to take it to the extreme. So it's about committing to a side, knowing, okay, I'm going to go left or I'm going to go right, but taking that lane back when you see, okay, this looks like if I tack here, I won't be sailing in between all these boats. It looks like I might have a lane to pass through and then maybe cut back. So I guess my advice isn't to always slam the corner for clear air, because that usually is going to be a tough one to come back from unless you get a big shift.
Okay, I'd like to ask if you could pull up one of those videos and talk about wind shadow and clear air, because I find it when I'm sailing in somebody else's bad air, that slows me down, and so I want to avoid that wind shadow. So maybe you could use some video to talk about where the wind shadow would affect another boat.
Sure, let me share my screen here. Okay, so this is upwind. There aren't a ton of boats here.
Upwind or downwind, Cynthia?
I don't think it matters, either direction.
Okay. So it's more so to see these boats back here. Some of these guys, want to worry about their air. It's always nice to be bow out on the boat that's above you. Wind shadow here, Ryan, let me know your opinion here about how many boat lengths to get like far apart here. Is A22's wind shadow affecting A14 or this boat to leeward of them here based on this distance? Or usually it's got to be just a little bit closer. You might get some bad air, but usually the closer you are to this boat right above you, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah. So I would say right here. Oh, if you go back to the video. Uh-oh, we lost it. So once we get back to that situation, hopefully you can pause it. Okay, here it is. So right here, I would say that A14 down there to the left, I would say they do have clean air, and A22 is not giving them bad air, but the boat that's behind the sail of A22 right now, I would say they might have bad air from A22. It might go that far. It's hard to tell because I'm not sailing in the race. So you can kind of tell if the other boats are going faster than you and it seems like they're pulling away from you, then you probably have bad air. That also, this boat, A14 might be giving that boat way back there bad air. Because their A14 is directly ahead of this other boat. But yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of have to feel like, okay, is this boat that's kind of close to me? Does it seem like they're kind of pulling away and going faster than me? Then you can kind of tell that way. So normally, like you can see, if you pause right here, Natalie, this is a really good example of like finding a lane. So if you look at these 6 boats kind of lined up here, right in the front, each one is doing a pretty good job of fighting for their lane of air. Like some may have a little bad air of like the boats kind of farther back, the 2 boats farther back, they may have bad air from the boats farther ahead. But each boat's doing a pretty good job of kind of fighting for keeping a lane and avoiding the wind shadows of the other boats here. So generally, you kind of want to set yourself up where you have a lane right here, because you can kind of think of the bad air as this triangle coming off the bow of each boat here. And there's a little bit less bad air coming off of the windward side of the boat, and there's a lot more bad air coming off the leeward side of the boat. But yeah, it's sort of a triangle coming off each of these boats. But like even if I was one of these boats that are farther behind right here, like I would take any of these spots. Some people might think they're in bad air here and they might try to tack, but if you tack right here, then you're going to be definitely sailing through bad air. So a lot of times it's better to try to, this is what it's called when you're trying to get a lane, is you're trying to avoid the bad air triangles of the other boats. Just a good example of finding a lane. And I would take any of these boats' positions, and I would not try to tack if I was any of these boats, because the tacking's gonna definitely send you through bad air.
Okay, and then just for another quick example of air, it gets especially more obvious when you're close quarters, like a start or a mark rounding. So you'll see here with this close quarters rounding, obviously 007 here is going to be getting a lot of bad air off this boat. They're right below them. And over the course of time, you know, they might not be able to point as high. They might start to fall off. 136 tacked out there. See how they've got clear air now? They chose to go out for clear air. Sometimes you might be trapped in a sense as a leeward boat without room to tack and go back. And now they came back now that they have what we've been talking about is a lane. So they've got clear air coming back this way. They're going out the way that they wanted to go. Other boats are starting to go out for another lane, and you'll see they probably tack back when they've got that. So the air gets a lot worse at the close quarters roundings and things. And if you look at some of the boats that are below others, you'll see their heeling or their pointing is not quite as good. Their boat speed's not quite as good as the boats that are out to windward. So those are some examples of lanes and clear air.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'm sure, I don't know if everybody has our emails, but more than happy to address any questions or things that come up if needed. I sail at Minnetonka, but I have done quite some time at Harriet when I first got started out sailing, and absolutely love sailing on that lake. It's a great group of people. So hopefully I'll stop by sometime and see everyone this summer. And for sure at the Die Hard, one of my favorite events of the sailing season in September. So hopefully see you all around at some point. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for coming and running through these videos with us and answering questions. We really appreciate both you and Ryan for doing that. So I saw that the dock was put in yesterday, and hopefully the buoys will be in soon. So we'll be able to get on the lake and start practicing some of our skills. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.